Hello, everyone. I'm Bo from Brutal Commentary, and today I'll be breaking down our next matchup for UFC Fight Night Perf. In this one, we have Jonathan Micallef taking on Themba Gorimbo. This is on surface looks like a pretty straightforward matchup, and stylistically, it pretty much is. It could be a bit of a trap fight, especially depending on where the fight ends up, as both guys have clear strengths, but one of those strengths might play directly into the other's hands. And you'll see what I'm talking about as I break these two down. Now, looking at our two fighters real quick, starting with Themba Gorimbo. He's currently 14-6 as a professional, 3-2 in his last five fights. I remember the sort of, I wouldn't say hype per se, but like the story of Themba Gorimbo, like he was, was basically poor. He was living in the gym until The Rock bought him a house essentially and went on a nice four-fight win streak, beating names like Pete Rodriguez, Ramiz Brahimaj, which aged very well. And then of that win streak, ended it with a win against Nico Price a year and a half ago. But since then, Gorimbo has lost two straight, getting submitted very quickly by Vicente Luque, and then most recently lost a decision to Jeremiah Wells. It definitely seems like at this point, Themba Gorimbo has definitely lost. Like I said, I wouldn't call it hype. I thought it was, a very nice story and overall just some attention. I think he's lost that is the best way to put it. Like originally, I know the UFC was backing him, and now at this point, the UFC is definitely off the Themba Gorimbo business, in my opinion. Now, for Jonathan Micallef, he's currently 9-1 as a professional, 4-1 in his last five fights. In the UFC, currently, Micallef is 2-0, winning his debut against Kevin Jousset last February. And then most recently, this February, won a come from behind victory in some ways when he submitted Oban Elliott. For Micallef, I know he's a pretty good prospect at 170 pounds, very good fighter from down under, and someone worth the watch at 170 pounds. I'm curious to see how far Micallef can go. And I think this fight against Themba Gorimbo is a pretty good matchmaking. At least it's a good way to see how far he can go. Because I'm not going to say Gorimbo is an easy fight, but I think it's winnable for Micallef with how I've heard some people talking about him. Well, that said, let's get down to the breakdown. Starting with Jonathan Micallef, I think Micallef's game is pretty well defined. On the feet, a very good southpaw kicker is the best way, I think, to break down Micallef's striking game. He does his best work from range. His kicking game is easily a standout weapon. You saw that on full display against against Kevin Jousset, where Micallef was just throwing leg kicks, body kicks, head kicks with the rear kick from southpaw. Good at keeping distance, throwing long kicks, and just managing space when Micallef is not under pressure. Offensively, he's solid. Defensively, that's where a lot of the issues, I think, for Micallef start to show. We saw in his fight with Oban Elliott that Micallef is very hittable. He doesn't move his head much. A lot of his defense relies on simply moving backwards in a straight line. And that can work against lower level competition, sure. But against someone who's willing to pressure, it becomes a real problem. And we saw, like, even though I know he got a good submission win over Oban Elliott, he was getting busted up on the feet before getting the trip, getting the back, and landing the rear naked choke. But with the problems I have with his striking defense, Micallef really shines on the ground. That's his world. Very slick submission artist with a strong sense of transitions. Micallef is consistently looking to improve position, and he's especially dangerous when it comes to taking the back and locking in the rear naked choke. I know he has some other submissions too, like a triangle choke he got on Contender Series. As even from the bottom, he's active, looking to scramble, submit, and ways to turn the bad positions into good ones. So that's what makes Micallef dangerous, especially in this type of matchup, because look at Themba Gorimbo. He's a much more pressure-oriented fighter. On the feet, Gorimbo's striking is serviceable. He's long. He uses his reach decently well. In fact, you look at the stats here. Which at 6'1" with a 77-inch reach, Themba Gorimbo uses it very well. Now, it's not going to matter much in this fight because Micallef matches him in reach at 77 inches, but is about an inch shorter, so it's not really going to play much of a factor. But against his other opponents, Gorimbo has used his reach decently. He'll His boxing is not the most technical, but he does have power. You saw with the Pete Rodriguez fight. And Gorimbo is willing to throw. But really, Gorimbo's real strength does lie in his wrestling. Very good at pushing forward, closing the distance, and get the fight to the ground. Once there, Gorimbo, he's not just holding position, he is working. He's good at transitions, decent control. Gorimbo's very comfortable in grappling exchanges. The issue, though, is that while he's a good grappler, he's not necessarily the cleanest defensively. He can make mistakes. He's been submitted before. Or, as you saw with not just Vicente Luque, but you look back at, now, granted, this was years ago. Oh, and he's improved since then. But against AJ Fletcher, Gorimbo got caught in agility. And I have some concerns about that as well. Like I said, I don't think AJ Fletcher's that good. In fact, he's no longer in the UFC. It does show Gorimbo, while he's a good wrestler and a good grappler, he's not the best defensively. And against someone like Micallef, that can be very dangerous for someone of Gorimbo's style. Now, how I see this fight playing out stylistically, this is where the fight gets interesting when you look at it stylistically, because normally a strong wrestler taking on a more striking-oriented fighter with grappling skills would favor the wrestler. But in this case, it's not that simple. Gorimbo's path to victory is through wrestling, but wrestling into Micallef, it means engaging directly into Micallef's strongest area. As Micallef doesn't need to force the fight to the ground, Gorimbo might just do that for him. So how the fight could play out, I expect Gorimbo to apply pressure. He'll look to close the distance and get past the kicking range of Micallef and initiate grappling, while Micallef will likely try to keep it at range at first, use his kicks and movements to slow Gorimbo down. But at some point, the fight's probably going to hit the mat. And that's where everything changes. Because if Gorimbo is on top, he'll look to control and work his usual game. But if Gorimbo's too aggressive, he'll leave some openings or mismanage the position, even slightly. Micallef is the kind of fighter who can capitalize immediately. And he doesn't need many chances. He just needs one. So for final assessment, it's one of those fights where the most obvious path might actually be the more dangerous one, because Gorimbo is a solid wrestler, sure, but it leads him directly into Micallef's best skill set. And while Gorimbo is capable on the ground, he's not airtight defensively. Micallef, on the other hand, thrives in chaos on the mat. He's opportunistic, he's creative, and he's very good at finding submissions in transitions. At the end of the day, I just simply think Themba Gorimbo's best skill set falls right into Jonathan Micallef's wheelhouse, and it's going to lead him to get caught in a submission. So for my official prediction, I'm going with Jonathan Micallef, and I'm going to pick him via submission. I think Gorimbo gets the fight to the ground, but in doing so, gives Micallef the exact kind of fight he wants, and eventually Micallef finds the opening and secures the finish. So, once again, I'm picking Jonathan Micallef to win, and I'm picking him via submission. And like I said, I think he's going to find submission. I think Gorimbo is going to make it a lot easier than Oban Elliott did, because Oban wanted to strike. Gorimbo's going to want to wrestle a bit more in this fight, I think. So, like I said, one more time, Jonathan Micallef via submission. But with that being said, that's been my breakdown of this matchup. If you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below on who you think's going to win. But until then, I've been Bo from Brutal Commentary. I thank you all for listening. And remember, stay calm, stay respectful, and enjoy the violence. I'll see y'all next time.